Hey, good morning, Harbor Covenant. My name is Matt. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the guy who's been an associate pastor here for 11 years. First 7 was as the youth pastor. The last 4 have been in communications and media. And now I find myself as your interim lead while we look for a new permanent lead pastor. And you all have been very kind and very supportive to me and my family. I've appreciated the nice texts and the nice cards and the prayers. I've definitely needed them, and I'm happy to report that I have not burned anything down yet. So, yay! Actually, I know that I'm called for this role for this time. I'm honored to be on staff as your pastor, but it's not lost on me how deep some of the faith is in our congregation, how loving a lot of you are to your neighbors, and how committed you are to the mission of reaching people for Jesus and the good news of the gospel, developing disciples and growing in faith and living lives of compassion and mercy and justice in our world. And I've had the chance to sit down with a few of you over this last month, and I've noticed a couple things, but one thing has stuck out pretty clearly. And that is, God has been at work in each of you long before I've ever met you, long before I ever came here to be on staff, long before I was born even. God has been at work in our lives. You have stories of faith that are so inspiring, faith stories of redemption and perseverance and integrity and life change and curiosity and brokenness and confession and service. And I'm reminded, as I've met with these people, I'm reminded of a time, this stuck out to me very clearly. I was in India on a trip for pastors. I was on the literal other side of the world, middle of the night, walking through a village, and I came across what might have been the oldest human I've ever seen in my life. She was, I don't know how old, she had wrinkly leather skin, and the first thought in my head was, God knows this woman. God was with her when she was born, way before I existed, on the other side of the world even. And it was a total reality check for me that God has been, we're going to use the word godding, everywhere on earth. And 99.9% of the time, it doesn't involve me. And that should be tremendously reassuring to all of humanity. I should confess, I have a sense of humor that can be a little bit self-deprecating. My mother and my wife aren't super fans of it because they love me, but it's where I live. I'm comfortable with it, so just roll with it. Because on my best days, I'm good to go. I'm excited, but on my worst days, I look at myself in the mirror and I think, I'm the guy they picked probably because I know where all the light bulbs are stored and I don't have a moving van parked outside of my house. Sometimes I'm just a basic 42-year-old guy whose structural integrity of my sanity is currently being tested by raising/funding 3 children, 2 jobs, and at the same time managing finances, schedules, cholesterol, all while global events in the world seem to be, what the heck is going on? Right? And I look in the mirror and I say, get a grip, dude. They need you. They need me? That's wild. And that phrase, get a grip, we might have heard it before. We try to get a grip on our finances or get a grip on our parenting policies like screen time for our kids or our health or even our spiritual growth. And maybe we walk into the worship center on a Sunday morning looking like we've all got it together with hair fixed and smiles practiced, but man, really, we're just 2 missed emails away from a nervous breakdown in the Costco parking lot. We think about faith even, being all in for Jesus. It's something we've been talking about this Lent season, and we might think that means having the strongest grip possible on our faith and not wavering. But if we're honest, sometimes it feels like the harder we squeeze, the more white our knuckles get, and something just isn't working. Some people like to call it fake it till you make it. Definitely been there. But as we're getting... But this is a reality check that we're going to look at this morning. The reality check is this, is the tighter the grip, and it rhymes, so this is great, the bigger the slip. You should remember that. The tighter the grip, the bigger the slip. Think of it like a bar of soap. The more you squeeze, the faster it flies across the bathroom. and breaks the mirror or something. I don't know. We're in a series called All In. And today's text is Luke 22, 31 through 34. And this is a moment where Peter, he's the disciple who was most likely to start a fight that he couldn't finish, decides that he is an MVP of the faith community, but he gets a reality check. And it goes like this. Jesus says, Simon, Simon, he also had another name. It's confusing sometimes, roll with it. Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. And Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. And so we get this idea that Peter is a person who likes to think, oh, I've got this. I can handle this. I'm ready to go. And Jesus is saying, he's telling Jesus, I'm ready to go to prison. I'm ready to die. And in all honesty, he probably believes it. And he feels that adrenaline. He feels like he has this great grip on his devotion. And we might be there sometimes. We might think, especially when things are going well, when the kids are actually listening, the bank account has more than 2 digits in it. We interpret God's presence as almost like a reward for our good grasp and handle on our faith. We think, man, I'm nailing this Christianity thing. God is clearly with me because I have no obstacles. And then we have obstacles. And then the wheels fall off. The doctor calls with the news that you didn't want. The job cuts happen. Or if you're like Peter, you flat out fail a moral test that you swore you'd pass. And suddenly we might think God has left our presence. God has left the building. We assume that his presence might be tied to our performance. And we think that because our grip has slipped, maybe God has let go a little bit too. But if you look at what Jesus says, he doesn't say, Peter, if you just try harder, or Peter, if you'll just, just work harder at this. He says, Satan is going to sift you, but I have prayed for you. To really get to why Jesus uses this specific image with Peter, we have to do some more agriculture learning. If you hear last week, we learned about seeds. This week, we're going to learn about wheat. In the first century, harvesting wheat wasn't a clean or industrial process. It was a violent, kind of multi-stage, very physical breakup of wheat. First, you had what was called threshing, which is basically you would beat the stalks of wheat to loosen up the grain from the straw. And then you'd have winnowing, which is where you would kind of throw the whole mess of it in the air and let the wind blow out all the light stuff. And the heavy things would fall to the ground. The husks would fall back to the floor. Or the husks would go away and the grain would fall back to the floor. But even after that, you weren't done because you still have a pile of good grain mixed with like dirt and pebbles and weeds that weren't blown away. And so this is where the sifting comes in. And you would use a sieve or a sieve. I don't know how to pronounce it. You can correct me later. But the sieve acts as a mini earthquake. The sifter would take a large kind of like wooden hoop with a mesh of like animal sinew or reeds, and they dump grain into it, and then they would shake it with a violent rhythm. And 2 things would happen. The small waste would fall out. So like the dust and the tiny debris would fall through the holes in the mesh. And then the big waste would rise up. So the shaking forces the larger impurities, the stones, the heavier weeds to the surface. And then the sifter can just hand pick them out and toss them away. And so Jesus uses this imagery to talk to Peter. And he tells Peter, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you. He's using maybe a terribly accurate metaphor of a spiritual crisis. The enemy's goal in sifting is to prove that there is no grain left. To shake Peter so hard that everything falls through the mesh and he's exposed as a total fraud. To show that Peter is all chaff, all dirt. There's not a single ounce of faith in him. But God uses the same sieve for a different reason. While the enemy wants to shake you to destroy you, God allows that shaking to refine you. He uses the sifting of our failures and our anxieties to bring the big waste to the surface, to bring our ego and our self-reliance or the I've got a grip on this attitude so he can finally pick it out of our lives. And Peter was very proud of his faith, but he had to be shaken until his pride was blown away and his self-reliance was pulled out. Only then was he able to truly follow Jesus and lead others. And so the reality check is that the shaking isn't a sign that God has left you. It's a sign that he's refining something in you. He's getting rid of the stuff that was never going to sustain you anyway. And so remember, the harder you squeeze, the more you realize, I'm not as in control as I think I am. Sometimes we see a strong faith in someone, but maybe it's just a bunch of anxiety with a good coat of Christian paint on top of it. Like we're going through life trying to manage every variable, and honestly, it's exhausting. We're the most in control generation in history. We have apps that track our sleep, that track our steps, that track our kids' locations. And yet we have never been more stressed. According to a study in the Alliance 2026 New Year's study, nearly 48% of Americans are reporting being more stressed this year than they were last year. And that flavor kind of changes depending on where you sit in the generational spectrum. Like Gen Z, you're dealing with mental health sifting. There's a study by the Blue Shield that in 2025 that said 94% of Gen Z report regular mental health challenges, mostly driven by the crushing cost of just existing. Housing, groceries, the weight of the news cycles. Millennials and Gen X, we find ourselves in the sandwich generation right now. We're worried about retirement and taxes. 78% of Gen X are specifically anxious that they won't be able to sustain their lifestyle in the future. You're trying to control a future that feels like it's just sifting right out under your feet. And boomers and above, you're worried about economic stability and healthcare costs, trying to hold on to a grip that you've worked very hard to maintain for many years. And I hear the same words from Jesus to Peter for us right now. Hey, there are forces that want to cause chaos in your life, but I am with you and I'm praying for you. And this is the posture of God toward our failure. Peter's all in was a promise of his own willpower. I can do this. I'm going to go to death. I'm going to go to prison. And Jesus' all in was this reality check. Hey, bud, I don't think you can do this on your own. In fact, you're going to fail. But when you do, I want you to remember that I'm still with you. And so I want you to start here. When you mess up, let's be honest, half of us messed up probably before we left the driveway this morning. How do you imagine God looking at you? I think one of the greatest gifts Pastor Jack gave us during his time here was challenging us to stop seeing God as a disappointed dad with crossed arms and a heavy sigh and a "I expected so much more from you" type attitude. If you look at the text, Jesus knows that Peter is going to faceplant horribly. He even predicts that there's this specific bird that's going to point it out to all of history that you are going to fail. And yet his response isn't a lecture of, you got to try harder. He isn't standing over Peter waiting for him to fail just so he can say, I told you so. Jesus prays for Peter instead. And this is the core question I have for this text, is how is God actually with us? We often think that God is with us by giving us strength to never fail, but this text shows us something different, that Jesus knows Peter is going to fail. He predicts the denial before it's going to happen. And so if Jesus knows we're going to fail, what is he doing? The first thing I think he's doing is he's interrupting our plans. I play this game when I come home sometimes. So we have a split level house, and there's 7 steps from where I enter to the top floor. And I think, how many steps is it going to take before I hear Dad? Or, hey, I need, and usually it's about the 3rd step. Never forget that. It's just, we're interrupted all the time when you're looking for rest or looking for a different reality. Interruption is all around us, and no one likes to be interrupted. And I think we kind of overlay that desire on God. We tend to view God's presence as a green light to our plans. If nothing is in our way, it's good to go. God is with us. And if the door slams shut, then he's blocked our call and he's not in that. He doesn't want us to go down that path. And that could be true. But if you look at the life of Jesus, his ministry was made up of a lot of interruptions. People falling through roofs. So while he was preaching, blind beggars shouting while he was traveling. And in our story today, Peter interrupting a very solemn meal. This is right after the very first Lord's Supper, so that he can be about his own ego. And scripture tells us in Proverbs 16:9, he says, in the hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Sometimes God is most with you when he's stopping you, when he's given you the red light, when he's canceled the contract, when he's sifting, when it feels like a setback, God can be in it. He's often more present in the disruptions of our self-reliance and our success and our self-will. He interrupts our plans, often to save us from ourselves. Another way I see God with us is interceding on our behalf. Baseball season is back, and I need to get football season out of in the rearview mirror, because that was painful as a Niner fan. So baseball season starts, and my Giants are horrible. It sucks to be a Bay Area fan right now. But one of the things I love about baseball is the designated hitter rule. The designated hitter, if you're not a baseball fan, is a specialist on the team. Their entire job is to hit. They don't field because they're a liability, but they can hit. And usually they take the place of someone who can't hit. So it's usually the pitcher. So in this story, Peter has some skills, but he's about to strike out looking. And when the Bible says Jesus intercedes for us, it's almost, in my mind, it's like, hey, he is going to be your designated hitter. He is the one that is going to stand before the Father and say, they're not going to do so great here. Let me step in and stand for them. God's posture towards us doesn't sound in this moment like he's disappointed. He isn't shocked that we're struggling. He's the one who wants to provide his strength so that we don't have to. He's actually already factored our failure into his plan, which is, I'm so glad he has. When you've said the thing that you can't take back, or you've done the thing that's caused damage, he is with you as your advocate. We get this word from 1 John 2. It says, my dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. The advocate, the word here is a legal term. It's parakletos. It's someone who stands in court on your behalf. So when you fail, not if you fail, when you fail, Jesus doesn't point to your sin. He points to his sacrifice. He points to himself. Another verse I like is Romans 8:26, and it says, the Spirit is with us by groaning on our behalf when we don't have the words to pray. When we're at our lowest and most silent, God is at his loudest, and he's on our behalf. So you aren't alone in your failure. You're being actively defended in it. And if you've been wondering, should I take a first step in faith in Jesus? I don't know about this. This is where a lot of us have started, realizing that we have messed up pretty royally, but God is there and sees us and forgives us and is loving us instead of ourselves. And so maybe you're in that moment this morning where I might feel God teaching me something, leading me somewhere. And as we do, we realize a third thing, a way that God is with us, is that he keeps his promises. There needs to be a shift from understanding God's presence as feeling to understanding God's presence is in his promises. In our culture, we kind of equate this with us as a warm, fuzzy feeling. Like you have a good cup of coffee, you watch the sunrise over the sound, hitting the water in all the right ways, and you're like, oh, God is so present in this moment. But when we're stuck in traffic and our kids are screaming and we assume that maybe he's not present anymore, he stepped out for lunch. Scripture teaches us that God's presence is covenantal. It doesn't change. It's not emotional. It's not dependent upon the situation. In the Old Testament, it's just a very visual thing, but the tabernacle is the place where God dwelt, is at the center of camp, and you can't move the center of camp. No matter how the Israelites felt, no matter what was going on through their day, God's presence was in the middle of their community, regardless of their grumbling. And in Christ, the presence of God now resides in our hearts, and it is there and immovable regardless. Hebrews 13:5 says, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." This is a covenantal guarantee. In the Greek, it's a double negative. It basically is like, never, ever will I leave you. Never, ever. And so we can apply this knowledge to God in the boring and the frustrating and the silent moments. His presence is a fact that can be rested in, not a feeling that we're always chasing from moment to moment. And so God is with you because he's made a promise to himself about you. His witness doesn't fluctuate based on our all-in-ness. And even when Peter is outside in the courtyard, weeping and swearing that he doesn't know Jesus, Jesus was still with him in his promises. God's grip on your life is held together by God's character, not by our strength. And this is where I think things can get practical for us, but they can also get vulnerable. We're in a town of Gig Harbor, and it feels like we have to have a brand to maintain. We're supposed to have a thriving career. We're supposed to have kids who excel at soccer and baseball and volleyball because we're paying so much money for all that. They might as well be good at it. Or a marriage that looks like a jewelry commercial. You're treating are we treating our spiritual lives the same way? We think being all in means this polished, finished product. But the reality check of Luke 22 is that the only thing Peter had to offer the future church was a comeback story from his failure. See, there's power in an honest story. Most of us walk around with this projected image. It's the version of us that has it all together. We think that if people really saw us, they would know that we're actually the ones struggling with a hidden habit, or we're the ones that feel like a fraud in our own home, or we're the ones maybe who relate more to Peter's denial than his bravery. If they knew that was about us, they'd walk away. They wouldn't want to know us. And the problem is it's hard to be loved if you're not known. And so we lead with our fake perfection. We feed into this creation of spectatorness in our community, watching how everyone is living their lives. And we sit in the chairs and we might admire others' lives while our own souls are probably starving for just a single honest interaction. Fake perfection doesn't inspire anyone. It just makes everyone else feel like they're the ones who are failing. And that is why your failure is a gift. Jesus told Peter, when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Notice he didn't say, when you've become perfect, give them a lecture. He said, when you've crashed and burned and you felt my grace, pick up those pieces, then you'll be able to strengthen your brothers. Your perfection is a wall. It tells people that we're not the same, that I don't need you, that you certainly don't need my help, and you have the problem. But our failure is a bridge. It tells people, I've been where you are. I've found out that God's grip on me is stronger than my mistakes, and you are giving the person, you're giving permission to that person just to breathe. Your scars not only tell your story, but they identify you as a safe place to be for someone else. So being all in isn't about being a hero. It isn't about being the hero of your own story or your family or your faith. There's no amount of prayers you can pray, fasting you can fast to earn your way into God's favor. It's about being a witness to God's mercy in your own story. I've already shared with you some of my more vulnerable thoughts about myself as a transitional lead pastor, and that's not just to cover my bases in case the church burns down. It's not like, I was like, oh, well, he tried. It's if anything, I want you to see that if there is any good in me, I want to give credit to God for it, for working in my life and working in this church and working with all of you who God is also at work in. If we want Harbor Cove to be a place of actual transformation, we have to start valuing honesty over image. We need to have people who can say, I tried to power my way through this week, and I failed. I lost my temper. I lost my faith. I lost my grip. But I found out that Jesus was with me the whole time. That kind of honesty is terrifying, because you can lose control of your image, which we hold on so dearly to. But we must remember that control is the very thing that Jesus is trying to take off our hands anyways. And so Peter's failure becomes the foundation for his ministry, and it can become the foundation for ours. He couldn't lead the church as a tough guy who never stumbled. He had to lead as the guy who knew exactly what it felt like to be rescued from the bottom of the pit that he dug himself. We need to stop faking it. It's exhausting, and frankly, we're not as good at it as we think we are. Everyone, I think, can see the cracks, and we might as well let grace shine through them. So I have 3 questions for you as we go into this week. The first one is for your head. Is when life gets hard, do you assume that God is angry? Or is he just maybe removing your need for control in that moment? The second question is for your heart. Is when you mess up, do you picture Jesus disappointed in you? Or actively praying for your comeback? And the third question is for your hands. Who needs your honest story of failure more than your fake perfection?